On le Roi du Monde by Charles Upton. Perhaps René Guénon's most controversial book is Le Roi du Monde, or The King of the World. Though just as rich in metaphysical insight and symbolic hermeneutics as the rest of his books, some have felt that Guenon had allowed himself in this work to be dazzled by a romantic exoticism of the Shangri-La variety, under the dubious influence of Ferdinand Ossendowski, whose stories of Agartha, the mysterious and supreme spiritual powerhouse in Central Asia, where the hidden King of the World reigns over the destinies of men, had seriously diverted him from his high calling of expositor of pure metaphysics. Marco Pallis took pains to convincingly debunk Ossendowski's Asian travel tales in an article in Studies of Comparative Religion, Winter-Spring 1983. It is clear, however, that Guenon was interested more in the cosmological symbolism of the King of the World and his hidden kingdom of Agartha than he was in its literal reality, though he did not absolutely deny the possibility of a geographical Agartha and a flesh-and-blood King of the World. I do apologize at this juncture for my likely mutilation of pronouncing Agartha or Agartha. I'm not sure. I apologize for my ignorance. Continuing with the text. What are we to make of the myth of Le Roi du Monde, and how real might this myth turn out to be in material historical terms? As myth, Guenon identifies the King of the World with the Hindu Manu, first lawgiver and archetypal human being of the present cycle of manifestation, from whose name derives the very word man. In one aspect, Manu is the representation in cosmic manifestation of God as the primordial ancestor, which is why it is in no way erroneous to identify him with the figure of Adam in the Judeo-Christian Islamic tradition, especially since both Jews and Muslims recognize Adam as the first prophet, and therefore, at least implicitly, as the primordial lawgiver. In much the same sense, the Zoroastrian Gaiomard is both first man and first prophet. In terms of the hierarchy of being, the meaning of the King of the World is as follows. Every material form simultaneously exists in different modes on every plane of being. A material stone, or plant, or animal, or human body is a truncated symbol, or partial reflection, of a form inhabiting the psychic or intermediate plane, which in turn symbolizes an entity residing on the angelic plane, which is symbolic of an essence occupying the archangelic or intelligible plane, which itself is an emanation of the Logos, the transformal origin of all forms, which is also God's eternal act of self-understanding in terms of cosmic creation viewed subspecies aeternitas. You can tell I never learned Latin. Anyway, that's myself, the reader. Continuing with the text. If the stone did not simultaneously exist on all planes of being, if it were not in continuous vital connection to the Logos, it could not appear in material reality. The hierarchy of being is the living stem of every object in universal manifestation. And what is true of stones is true of men. If the human archetype did not exist on all levels of being simultaneously, if he were not in fact the secret essence of the Logos himself, which the esoteric teachings of many traditions, Sufism within Islam, Kabbalah within Judaism, as well as various forms of Christian esotericism, identify with the primordial man, then there would be no men on earth. Therefore, no matter how far humanity has fallen, our archetype, our fitra, or primordial human nature, remains in its original integrity. This is the King of the World. If every fall is, in one sense, a fall into illusion, then it must be true, in one sense, that the fall was illusory, the man never fell. The consequences of this illusory fall are, unfortunately, all too real, just as the Zoroastrian Fravashi or Fravarti is the aspect of my soul which never descended into material manifestation, so the aspect of Adam that never ate of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil is precisely le roi du monde. And those archaic religions, including many of the religions of Africa, certain aspects of Siberian shamanism, and the Chinese Taoist worship of the Yellow Emperor, which are oriented not to the savior, the law-giving prophet or the redeeming avatar, who comes later in the cycle in order to redress its corruption, but to the original ancestor, are worshipping the king of the world. Among these we may class the Mandaeans of Iraq, who worship not Christ, the second Adam, but rather the secret Adam, the first man. But in a much more restricted sense, we have already met in various forms the king of the world. He was alive in the 20th century and has survived into the 21st. Who else, after all, was the 16th Gyalwa Karmapa, when he donned the black crown? Who else is the Dalai Lama? Who else is the master of any Sufi order? Who else is the Shiites' hidden imam? There may or may not have been a single incarnate and universally recognized king of the world in Central Asia, but all these well-known figures are certainly aspects or instances or delegates of that kingship. The Jewish Kabbalists and the Muslim Sufis both possess a lore of the hidden hierarchy and its pole, that one whose degree of spiritual realization is preeminent in his own time, he whom the Sufis call the Qutb, the pole of the age. In certain ages the Qutb may be generally known, though his true identity as pole of the age will not be realized by everyone. In other ages he remains hidden. The master of every Sufi order is, in essence, the presence of this very Qutb for his followers, if, that is, he is a true master. The Vajrayana Buddhists possess a similar lore. So, in a certain sense, the king of the world is no mystery. Many today are outwardly familiar with him, though certainly not everyone who has heard of him recognizes him for who he is. So let us not wrangle too much about Guénon's own rendition of Le Roi du Monde. It is clear that he was on the right track. However, the lore of Vajrayana Buddhism does present us with a figure who, even more than the Gyalwa Karmapa or the Dalai Lama, seems to fulfill many of the criteria of Guénon's king of the world. If we replace the mysterious kingdom of Agartha, a word which means ungraspable, and thus may have originally have been more an epithet than a place name, with the much better attested kingdom of Shambala, we may find in the lineage of the kings of Shambala the possible prototype of Guénon's and Ossendowski's king of the world. Shambala is a realm where myth and history interact. As a geographical kingdom subject to terrestrial history, Shambala may have been located north of the Tarim Basin in Central Asia, eastern Turkestan to be exact, which is north of Tibet, as a pure land. It is the area of the Alam al-Mittal associated with the tantric tradition known as Kalachakra, which forms an important part of Vajrayana Buddhism, though it is pre-Buddhist in origin and may have affinities with the Hindu Vedanta. The first of the kings of Shambala was Sukandra. 878 to 876 BC. Or no, sorry, that's an estimate of his birth. And the last will be Raudra Chakri, 2327 to 2427 AD. In the Wheel of Time, the Kala Chakra in Context, page 56 to 57, by Geshe Lumdub Soppa, Roger Jackson, and John Newman, the King of the World is described as follows. The Kalki, the lineage king, of Shambala binds his hair locks on top of his head. He wears a sacred headdress made out of dyed lion's hair and a crown marked with the symbol of the 5 Buddha families. He wears the costume of a universal emperor, Chakravartiraja, and fortunate people are able to obtain the good path by simply seeing or touching him. The Kalki's emblematic earrings and the bracelets on his arms and legs are made of the gold from the Jambu River. The light of his ornaments mixes with the light that rises from the white and red luster of his body. It shines out of the horizon. It is so bright that even the gods cannot bear it. The Kalki has excellent ministers, generals, and even many queens, and a great many queens. He has a bodyguard, elephant, and elephant trainers, horses, chariots, and palanquins. His own wealth and the wealth of his subjects, the power of his magic spells, the nagas, demons, and goblins that serve him, the wealth offered to him by the centaurs, and the quality of his food are all such that even the Lord of the gods cannot compete with him. Since the Kalki has a great many queens, he has many sons and daughters. However, when the Kalki to be is born, it does not matter whether he is the oldest son or not, there is a rain of white lotus flowers, and for 1 week prior to his birth, the crown prince's body emits light like a radiant jewel. The queen mother, a daughter of one of the 96 satraps of Shambala, is distinguished by the fact that at the time of her birth a rain of blue lotuses falls and a huge, previously unknown flower grows in front of her home. The Kalki and the queens possess the 4 aims of life, identical to the Hindu ashramas: sensual pleasure, wealth, ethics, and liberation. They never become sick or old, and although they always enjoy sensual pleasure, their virtue never decreases. The Kalki does not have more than 1 or 2 heirs, and he has many daughters who are given as Vajra ladies during the initiations held on the full moon of Chaitra each year. The fact that Shambhala is situated north of India, north of the Himalayas, north of Tibet, and north of the Tarim River, and the related legend that the kings of Shambhala counted among their servants the centaurs, emblem of the constellation of Sagittarius, whose month borders the winter solstice, marks it as a Hyperborean kingdom, the polar king of which is the Kalki, around whom the entire universe of the Kala Chakra revolves, just as the universe of China, or the entire universe seen as centered in China, identified as the Middle Kingdom, revolves around the emperor when he ascended the altar of earth within the temple of heaven in Beijing on the winter solstice and worshipped the pole star. And the Kalki's heraldic colors, red and white, are shared, interestingly enough, by a more familiar Hyperborean figure, Santa Claus. Like the Kalki, Santa is also served by elemental spirits, the elves, and the figure of Santa Claus and his reindeer has shamanic affinities as well. Some scholars associate the red and white costume of Santa Claus with the scarlet, white-spotted psychedelic mushroom Amanita muscaria, or fly agaric, which is used by certain Siberian shamans, and which mycologist, I'm sorry, R. Gordon Wasson, considers to be the sacred Soma plant mentioned in the Hindu Vedas, an attribution also accepted by Huston Smith. In the words of the Rig Veda, we've quaffed the Soma bright, and are immortal grown. We've entered into light, and all the gods have known. Fly agaric is a favourite food of reindeer, which is why the drinking of reindeer urine as an intoxicant is, or was, practiced in Finland and elsewhere in the far north. So the Kalki of Shambala would certainly seem to correspond in many ways to Guenon's Roi de Monde, although the question of whether or not the lineage of the kings of Shambala still remains hidden in Central Asia on the human historical plane, or whether it has ascended into occultation in the Alam al-Mittal, remains extremely difficult to answer. If you value my work, I'd be most grateful if you would like, subscribe, leave a comment, and share this video with anyone you think might be interested. If you would like to support me in working on this project, I'd be deeply thankful if you would consider becoming a regular supporter through Patreon or making a one-time donation through Ko-fi, links in the description. If you'd prefer to read my essays over the video format, they are all available in written form on Substack, link also in the description.